So recently, a bunch of unaired pilots found their way online, dating back to the 90s. What I want to do is look at these pilots and determine two things. 1. Did it have potential? And 2. How different would popular culture be if this pilot was picked up for series? Today we're opening up the pilot vault and looking at the pilot for a show called How I Met Your Dad, a proposed follow-up to How I Met Your Mother that was meant to come out the same year that show ended, but the network passed on it for reasons we'll get into in a moment. Now, you may know of the spin-off How I Met Your Father, the Hilary Duff show that came a little after. That's not related to this one. This has entirely different characters, actors, and plot. Well, the basic idea is still the same. An old woman retelling the tale of how she met her kid's father. What the plot basically is Sally's journey of how she met her daughter's father. She lives in New York with her friends, is getting divorced from her first husband, and has no idea what she is doing with her life. We start the episode with the main character, Sally, typing a letter to someone named Cricket. Probably not the guy from Always Sunny, but that would be an interesting twist. It turns out Cricket is her kid. Wait, the plot said that it was her daughter? Who names a girl Cricket? Who names a kid Cricket? Full stop, really? Anyway, this series was supposed to be bookended by her typing this letter at a typewriter every episode, instead of how in How I Met Your Mother, where Ted was telling the story to his kids directly. The future version of Sally is voiced by Meg Ryan, which is a great guess. Bob Saget nailed it as future Ted after all. You may as well get a big name in, if you can get away with only using their voice. In How I Met Your Father, we actually saw the future version of Hilary Duff's character, Sophie. We see her sat on the couch, drinking wine, talking about how she met her kid's dad, and I feel like that's a better way to do it than this typewriter thing. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned, How I Met Your Father came about when some guy named Isaac Apatow did a rewrite of this pilot. So some of the ideas are still in there. You'll see what I mean as we go. But for the most part, it's completely different. Sally says that the story starts when she is 27 years old, and she talks about how she used to be a mess. And while her daughter thinks that she was always perfect, that story is far from the truth, and it's actually much funnier than that. Pretty bold of a sitcom to start by saying, this show is going to be really funny guys, I promise. It's always interesting when the writers tell us stuff rather than show us it. We meet a young Sally, who is played by Greta Gerwig, the director of Barbie. That's pretty cool, right? We also meet her best friend Juliet. Then Sally goes back to her apartment, where she reveals to her daughter that she was married before she met their dad. Which is weird, that she's only just finding out now. Has she ever met her mum before? Surely that stuff would come up. Sally wakes her husband up to play him a song and sing over it. They could have at least made it a memorable song, but instead it's just like, oh, she's so quirky, that kind of behaviour. It then cuts forward to 3 days later, where they're divorced and Sally is staying with her brother and his husband. Their names are Danny and Todd. We know this because their narration tells us. At least this way, we know the characters' names, rather than having a friend say it about 50 times like they did in Imperfect Union. Or not saying the character names at all, like in most of the other unaired pilots we've seen. So something interesting happens in this pilot. Sally is explaining how her relationship with her husband fell apart, and she says, he was in a band, the band's name isn't important. Then he shouts it, revealing that it's an appropriate name and that's a joke. Now, back in How I Met Your Mother, whenever Ted obscured or censored something in his narration, we would see it happen in the show. Like when he covered up talking about smoking weed as eating a sandwich. We saw him on screen, smuggling a sandwich into places. Or when the neighbours above him were going at it, being noisy. He covered that up by saying they were playing bagpipe, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. So already this pilot seems to be operating on a different logic than How I Met Your Mother. We see how much her husband has changed since he left the band and became a boring Wall Street guy. He talks about his system for labelling wines. Green means go drink it, orange means be cautious, and red means leave it so it can age. I'd love Michael Scott to spend an evening in this apartment.
We got the green dot, that means go. Enjoy.
Green means go, so I know to go ahead and shut up about it.
The brand of this chicken is Crispy Bird Chicken, which is definitely not KFC for legal reasons. It's then revealed that Danny and Todd are adopting a child. This was clearly setting up some future storylines. It doesn't really go into it in here. After all, it's a pilot, we don't have much time for anything. Sally and Todd sing a song. It's an interesting song. If I still drank, I'd definitely be singing this in my kitchen next time I was drunk. See, I know this is stupid, but I find it quite endearing. It's the kind of thing that my sister and I would joke about. That's what How I Met Your Mother was. We always had fun laughing at the jokes in that show, and I could easily see us quoting this. You can tell that it's the same writers. It's got that same heart and spirit to it. Sally then sets up a date with someone from her friend Juliet's workplace. It's here that we learn Sally's job. She's a guidance counsellor, which feels like it was chosen for irony. I know that we didn't have much time for it, and it's just a pilot, you know, everything's rushed. But it would have been interesting to see her at work. I mean, we would have had the pilot been greenlit, but it was never commissioned for a full series, so this is all we have to go on. It's a shame really, because I definitely saw potential in this. I would have definitely watched it. But little things like Danny and Todd adopting a kid, or Sally's job, they just throw away lines to set up future stuff that we will never see. Sally ruins her date by talking about her husband and a divorce the entire time. It reminded me of how Ted ruined his first date with Robin by telling her that he loved her. As George Lucas would say, it's like poetry, it rhymes. The date's name is Frank, and he's clearly intended to be the Robin of the series. So that's our gang: Sally, Frank, Juliet, Danny and Todd. This pilot did a really good job, giving its characters not only great personalities but a platform for us to learn their names in the 20 minutes we had. There's no other show in this series that I can name every character of. That's a really good sign. I will never know the name of that stupid news anchor character in Separated at Worth, but I remember these guys because the characters are actually well written enough to have their own personalities and stand out. Sally considers getting back together with her ex, but then changes her mind when she realises that she'd have to follow his rules and not open the really expensive bottle of champagne. Which, to be honest, is pretty reckless, isn't it? In this economy, you've got to be careful. God, am I the boring square? There's a fun thing in this show that we see twice. Sally is able to tell what her brother is really thinking based on his facial expressions. So we see two versions of it. One version where he's saying what he's saying, then a second version where the subtext is thrown aside and we instead hear what he's thinking. I quite like this sibling relationship. It was really something that was missing in How I Met Your Mother. There was that one episode where Ted's sister moved to New York, and it was set up as though she was going to be a recurring character, but then for some reason we never saw her again. The creators clearly wanted to show a strong sibling relationship ever since, which is probably why they brought it into this show. They open the expensive champagne in a cafe because, you know, that's fine, and Frank volunteers to go and get them some glasses. This is a perfectly normal thing to do, so it's really strange how this makes Todd say, "That boy is a delight." What? Because he offered to do something everyone else would offer to do. Something as simple as going to get some glasses. That reaction is so unwarranted. I'm baffled by that. Now, the ending of this pilot really confuses me. While the end of the How I Met Your Mother pilot ended with Ted saying, "And that's how I met your Aunt Robin." So the twist is, the whole time we thought that Aunt Robin was going to be the mum, but the twist is that, no, it's not. And the end of How I Met Your Father, the pilot, was one of these three men is your dad. This pilot just ends with, "And that's how I met your dad." And we pan over to see a framed photo of Frank holding the baby cricket. That's a terrible name. Who in a post-Sunny world, actually, who even in a pre-Always Sunny world would name their kid Cricket? You just ask him for your kid to be bullied. And that's how I met your dad. Honestly, I'd say that this was more enjoyable than the pilot for How I Met Your Father. But I can see how the ending put the studio off. There's no mystery there. The whole point of the show is that it's a love story in reverse. So to throw that out the window is confusing. I suppose while this does take away from the spirit of the show. Symbolically, it could be seen as the story that she's telling isn't about how she met Frank for the first time, but how she got to know him, how he went from being a friend to the father of her child. In the original How I Met Your Mother series, they had a twist at the end of that show, which was that the mother had died, which was why Ted was telling the story to his kids. What if the reason why Sally was writing the letter was because Cricket, her daughter, had died not long after being born? So it's like a letter in the bottle. That's why it's a letter, because she can't physically tell her the story because she's no longer there. It would explain why the daughter had no idea that Sally was previously married. That would have been a really dark twist if that's what they went with, but I think that's where they was going with it. Apparently, the only reason why CBS passed on this was because the show creators did not want to reshoot the pilot, probably to change the ending. Why didn't they want to do the reshoots? This could have been a great show. They should have just listened to them and made the changes. But I suppose after creating one hit CBS sitcom, they felt like they knew better, which in fairness they probably did, didn't they? Maybe the network notes would have turned this pilot into something awful. So where does this pilot rank among the other unaired pilots? Well, honestly, I really enjoyed it, and I could easily see myself watching every episode, and it becoming one of mine and my sister's new favourite shows to talk about. And you know what? I'd have probably enjoyed it more than I enjoy How I Met Your Father. Despite me thinking that there is technically a better version of the show, the setup feels better, but I'm more attached to the characters in How I Met Your Dad. I enjoyed this show more. I'm not sure if this will surprise you, but I'm going to put this in second place, right behind the Elvira show. I very easily could have watched a few seasons of these guys, and I'm sad that we'll never get to see more of them. Instead, they've been left to gather dust in limbo, hidden in the corner of the pilot vault. I am gutted we never got to know what the twist was gonna be. I wonder if they'll ever come out and tell us. I'm certain that they'll try to reuse some of these ideas in How I Met Your Father, but let's be honest, that's not the best show, is it? Right, do you want me to talk about more unaired pilots? Are there any specific unaired pilots you want me to talk about? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe. Help us reach 4K. Right, I'm gonna let you go. Bye.